You may get to a point on your spiritual journey where you can't figure out why the things that you've been working towards, the stuff that you've been practicing, why it hasn't integrated into you. Hey guys, welcome back to You Are the Ocean, a podcast dedicated to navigating life's currents, moving in divine flow, and connecting to your inner wisdom. I'm your host, Tara. And today I kind of look like a 19th century lady, but I guess that's just vibe, but whatever. I'm just realizing that as I'm like looking, I'm like, wait a second, why do I look like I belong in an old picture frame? All right. Sorry guys, I just had to say something. Right. So, if you're in a place where you feel like you have been stagnated, like stuck, even though you've been consistently reading or studying different practices and trying to figure ways to shift yourself into the person that you want to be, and yet you feel like it's just not happening, it may not be you. It may be your environment. So this happened to me in my personal experience. So I'll be touching base on that a little bit later on, what that looked like for me and how I came to this conclusion. But if that's the case, I want you to consider, what is your home life like? Who are the people that you spend the most time with? And where do you spend the most time? Sorry, I'm getting comfortable. So, on the spiritual path, we hear a lot about how shifting the internal is the thing that is going to shift your external environment, right? But this episode is kind of based not on that, because I do believe that that's true, but there are some cases where you need to shift your external environment in order to recognize your internal shifts. Um, so let's get into it, folks. Something that could be a subtle sabotage to your journey is the environments that you find yourself in along the way, or the environments you allow yourself to grow comfortable in along the way, right? You could be in environments or around people, thus surrounding yourself with some of the same triggers that come up with you. Being surrounded by people who hold you to old standards and old versions of yourself, and essentially people or places that project your old self back onto you. If this is confusing, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper. So, growth is vulnerable. When you're in the state of growth, it's usually slow and steady and hard to see. Think about when you're like trying to work out, maybe you're trying to build muscle, get toned. It doesn't happen overnight, right? It's really hard to see what is going on with your body unless you're taking like progress photos, because if you're just looking in the mirror every day, you don't see a difference, right? But if you look back 3 months, you're like, oh, wow, there is a really big difference. Like, I've got biceps. Just kidding. But like, the same thing is occurring with your spiritual growth. The steps that you take might feel or seem small, sometimes so small that you don't even really recognize them, or it accumulates so slowly that you don't realize how much that you've changed in the amount of time. You can only see the present, and usually like what you still want to change, unfortunately, which is why I'm always like a big advocate of, you know, keeping a journal so that you can kind of keep track of like what your psyche was from the past, or like your beliefs or the way that you thought or spoke in your journal, and then seeing the growth from there. That's like a great way of keeping track of your spiritual growth. Side note. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about my experiences. In my own experience, I can see this occurring the most with the long term relationship that I was in. I was already in a habit of like second guessing myself, and the relationship that I was in only kind of enforced those habits of second guessing myself. So, when that is the case, it made it even more difficult for me to recognize the growth that I made, because all I could see was the fact that the conflict that I was trying to resolve kind of still continued to cycle back. Like I was still, well, I guess we were still going through the same exhausting cycles, like no matter what I did. And that made me think, well, I must be just doing something wrong. So I just kept pushing and pushing myself to keep trying to get better at communicating, being like more patient, just overall, just trying to essentially, I guess, be a perfect human being, because my perfectionism was on fire back then. But I truly believed that I had to control this situation by somehow controlling myself and everything that I was doing. Um, the relationship that I was in kept triggering me in the same ways. And the triggers kept occurring despite the fact that I would vocalize these triggers to the person. And I would tell them like where I believe the root causes came from, whether it be like childhood trauma or like issues that I had, the things that affected me, and, what would be helpful if I am asking for help, or if I feel like I need like an extra whatever support, right? In moments that are difficult for me. So that was one of the things that I tried my best to do, like to be able to calmly explain what I needed, to be able to say what was the problem, and to be able to explain the root of it. So I got really good at getting to know myself and being able to say all of these things. The issue was the person that I was with still did the things that were that I had vocalized was upsetting to me. And instead of, I mean, I did try and hold them accountable for that, but somehow I felt like it always kind of ended up on me, like being too sensitive, or maybe I could just figure out a way to like get less upset about it, or maybe I shouldn't be upset about it whatsoever. But all of these things kind of felt like failings on my part in the end, no matter what it was. I didn't quite yet clearly recognize that it was actually just like my boundaries getting ignored. um, I didn't truly really see that until the very end. And that is the period when I decided to separate myself from this person. Because at a certain point, like, it takes two to tango, they always say, right? You can do everything possible to try and fix a situation, but sometimes it's not really for you to fix. Sometimes you just have to realize that you can't control the people around you or the environment that you're in. And if it is negatively affecting you, then it's something that needs to be stepped away from. And this can be really hard when it's relationships. Like this was an 8-year relationship for me, and I really had a belief that it would turn around at some point, like things would get better. But all I really realized near the end was, wait a second, I've gotten really, really good at communicating and saying what I need and saying the things that are like difficult when I need support, like how I need support. But nothing has changed. In fact, it seems that almost like it was happening, the things that were happening, it was almost like they were blatantly on purpose, because I was like, how much more clear could I be? At that point, I was like, all right, I guess I have to bow out of this relationship for my health, because being intentionally ignored by the person you are in a relationship with is one of the most painful things. I'm laughing about it now, but extremely painful. It makes you feel very small and it makes you feel very powerless. Even though I was trying to invoke my power by speaking up for myself, um, a lot of times it just ended up kind of like being belittled. So this felt like it was kind of like a long explanation. So, oh, sorry about that. But all of this to say, all of this to say, you're not impervious to your triggers, and you probably won't be for a while, at least while you're still healing. Um, you can't heal wounds that are still being inflicted upon. So, one core wounds that you can have can be compiled upon, and the compilation of wound, trigger, and wound, and a trigger, and a wound, it just starts to become heavier and heavier until you're just being crushed by the weight of it. You know what I mean? Being surrounded by people and places that reinforce the old versions of you, it makes it really hard for you to see the changes. It's like a feedback loop. So in my case, the person that I was with kept assuming my that I was going to behave a certain way, or that I was going to be stressed out by something, or that I was going to be upset by something, before actually even talking to me or giving me a chance to be in the situation. They just kind of made assumptions based off past experiences and assumed that that was how I was going to behave, and then reacted towards me with the idea of that happening. And so that is, the assumptions kind of acted like a little hamster wheel in a way, just kind of like inching it forward and starting the loop. And it can be really hard not to get caught up in that little hamster wheel, especially when you're still working on solidifying yourself in these new habits, new thought processes, new versions of yourself. It can be so easy to slip back into the cycles with people, especially people who are refusing to see your growth. And that can be really damaging to your journey, because in the end you end up thinking like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I just not end up in these like arguments and cycles? And in the end it feels like somehow your fault. And the self-blame is the thing that's going to hold you back even more, because blame is the opposite of what you need when you're trying to grow and change into a better human being, a better version of yourself. You need forgiveness, you need grace. So being in a space where all you're doing is like crapping on yourself is not going to help the journey. It's just going to make it real hard. What is that accent? I'm not even. Um, anyway, in the same vein, being around people who don't respect your new boundaries, or they don't acknowledge the new life that you're trying to create, even though you're actively talking about it. People who talk down on you for the choices that you're making or try and minimize the choices that you're making, even though, like, even small steps are huge. Just choosing to move differently in the world is huge. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a leap, but being around people who try and minimize your growth or at worst, like, completely ignore it, like, or like not even just ignore it or try and I feel like there could be some people who try to prove you wrong by trying to get you caught up in those cycles. That's just how some people are wired. Like, because if you stay the same, then it makes them feel less bad that they're staying the same. And that's just not fair to you. And it's just not helpful for them in the long run. So, and this can come from anywhere. It could come from partners and relationships. It could come from your family members, your friends, even your work environment, depending on how it affects you. So you can't heal in the same place that hurt you. We've all heard this phrase, right? Um, and that generally rings pretty true, unless the place that hurt you is with you actively trying to shift and change and grow and expand into a new, more supportive version. But a lot of the times we find ourselves in situations and with people that are not trying to grow with us. They usually are content with staying the same. And that is 100% their path and their choice. And that is totally fine. If that's what works for them, that's what works for them. It's not our place to decide. Like, and it's not our place to feel like superior either. Like, you know, the spiritual journey that we're on is for this lifetime, for this moment in our spiritual timeline. Maybe it's not for them. Maybe they're going to do it in the next lifetime or two lifetimes from now. Who knows? Like, we don't know the plan. It's not up to us to decide like what's right or what's wrong. All we can really do is decide what's wrong for us, right? So, a little advice. Um, so things that are necessities for when you are on this healing and growth journey, spiritual journey, I think it's all connected. Um, be discerning with the people and the environments around you, like we talked about. Depending on who's around you, what's around you, it can really put blinders on you and your ability to see your growth and what you're doing and how you're moving. You need people who are dedicated to supporting your growth and recognizing that growth, because the right people will recognize that growth. And it feels so good to be seen by people who see you growing and say, "I'm so proud of you." Or, that can be life changing, and of course, recognizing yourself is important, number one, but like let's not lie, it feels good to be recognized, especially by the people who love you the most, right? So only you are going to know if and when you need to distance yourself from situations or people. Use your own discernment. And I know that some situations are difficult to separate yourself from. So, I mean, I feel really privileged that I was able to completely distance myself and create space for myself to be alone and figure out what was going on within me, to really see myself. Um, so you may not be able to do it like permanently, like the way that I have, but what I would recommend is try and find as much time as you can to be by yourself, because that is going to give you time to get to know yourself outside of these cycles and these environments that might be confusing you or making you feel stuck. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to be alone. Like, honestly, some of the greatest moments of like self discovery for me have been in community with people who were my dearest friends, people who have like the warmest hearts, and them holding space for me and allowing myself to speak about my experience. That helped me to see myself better. But I'm also somebody who I actually sometimes learn a little bit better by speaking. So if you're one of those people, you definitely can heal within community. And I do recommend it because supportive environments are everything. Um, and yeah, so maybe healing for you means hermit mode and just having nobody around you whatsoever. I respect that. I love being alone. I really, really do. Um, but again, only you're going to figure out what is the right situation for you. And if you are confused and you aren't sure if it really is your environment or a certain person, again, just try your best to find time where you can distance yourself from it and just be with you. Just allow yourself to exist and get to know yourself outside of these places and spaces and, I don't know, relationship situations and stuff. Okay, so that is the episode. I hope you guys are doing really well. Thank you for the people who are still listening and people who have subscribed to the channel. Yeah, this is like really weird and new, and it's kind of fun actually. I have a few subscribers, hee hee. So if you're passing by and you like this, definitely subscribe. I always forget to talk about that kind of thing. Leave a comment on YouTube. I think you can leave comments on Spotify too. You know, all of the all the things that help small channels grow. Do it, like it, all that stuff. Okay. Well, I'm not going to hold you. Oh, but I do want to say, I'm thinking of doing, ow, I'm thinking of doing tarot readings, maybe like not um, in the podcast because I feel like that extends it like a little too long. But maybe just as separate videos. Yeah, let me know what you think. Um, yeah, so I'll see you around. See you in the next one. Bye.